My name is Zhanna. I'm the head of the app panel within the UCL Leaders conference, and today I'm joined by a contemporary multimedia artist, Annya Sand. Thank you, Annya, for joining us today. And unfortunately, Annya cannot be present physically at the panel on Saturday, but she still wanted to contribute virtually. So thank you so much for that, Annya. I'm thrilled to have a discussion with you today. And would you mind just presenting yourself and maybe telling us what you're currently working on?
Thank you for having me. Yes, sure. So my name is Annya Sand. I'm an artist. I am a visual artist. So most of my works are installations and paintings, live performances. My latest project is a live project that actually came to life. It's called Wow London. It's Women Artists Art Week, abbreviated as Wow London, where I'm trying to encourage the art industry to be more inclusive towards female artists, and by asking them to show solely female artists during 1 week in June, from the 8th to the 15th of June, annually. Therefore, to make it more normal for people to see female artists everywhere, and to provide female artists with a more sort of self-sufficient, sustainable financial environment, and make it easier for the galleries have the confidence in female artists. So yeah, this is my latest project that somehow came alive.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Congrats on that. And I think this project definitely has a great potential, and it's such a good cause. And I'm very happy to see you working on that. And I think it's absolutely great. I think before we really dive deep into the topic, could I just ask you, this is a very vague question, but I still have to ask, what really inspired you at the first place to become an artist? What was your initial thought?
I didn't have a choice. My granddad was an architect. My father was an artist jeweler. So growing up in that environment, I think, makes it more normal. I did try to pursue the normal career. However, I think for artists, it's very challenging mentally to belong to that normal world when you're not from that world. Therefore, I ended up doing what I love.
Yeah. So would you say that those people from your family really influenced you in pursuing this career as an artist?
I think so. And the environment, I've spent a lot of time in my dad's studio where he had other artists come in, and the discussions and the freedom of it, the challenges of it, the beauty of it. It's just that sense. It was about the sense of belonging for me personally.
I see. As a contemporary artist, and also I guess as a female, how much does your approach to art really differ to maybe their approach? And do you think that with the time, obviously your father's generation and your granddad's generation, they're completely different to yours and mine. Do you think that the meaning people put in art really evolved since then?
I think it became more active, less restricted, which is a good thing. But the message is still the same, I think, especially when we live in very conflicting times.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that the technology might have changed, the media might have changed, but the messages from humans, they're always somewhat similar, whatever the generations it is. But I guess we'll also talk about that in more detail further on in our discussion. I guess connecting that to the main topic of the panel, which is art as a tool of bringing meaning to the world. Meaning, I guess we can agree that it's such a vague and subjective concept that even the greatest philosophers couldn't really find this consensus of what is meaning, and everyone formulated their own definitions. And for example, Kant, he really believed in carrying one's duty and acting of one's duty, which is the main meaning of a human life. Do you agree that there could be duty to art, and do artists have duty in some sense?
I don't know. I wouldn't use the term duty. I would say more of a fortune, destiny. And I can tell you why. I think that on a very fundamental level, art is about the freedom of expression. And freedom is a very rare commodity these days. It's about the solidarity of freedom, and maybe the freedom itself in a way. And therefore, naturally, it becomes sort of political by questioning the authorities. It becomes socially engaging. It starts asking questions about the aesthetics, the decadences, the fragilities of life. And by questioning all of those things, art has that power to present us with a platform where we can freely and safely discuss and express those things. And this is one of those things about art that you can look at it as a duty, but I think it's more of a gift that we have, that many people, can't access.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I do agree that art really provides the strong platform and means of conveying those ideas, and it really gives you the freedom of expression and the freedom of, even exploring yourself within those topics.
Absolutely.
I know that you collaborated with UNESCO. I think it was 2016, where you wanted to promote the cultural diversity within art, which I think is absolutely essential and great. Could you just tell us more about that, and what was your also kind of motivation within that?
Well, it was a wonderful experience. I was chosen amongst other artists to take part, and I think that everyone who did take part were very culturally, ethnically diverse, which made it a very special environment. And we talked a lot about politics, the meaning of art, the values of the dialogue, and how often when politicians fail to keep the dialogue going, art doesn't. And even by giving really simple examples of being in a room with strangers today, for example, sorry, I would feel very nervous about bringing up politics because it might hurt somebody, it might upset someone, it might make somebody angry. I would feel very careful with bringing up religion as well for the same reason. I would be careful with bringing up technology because I don't understand it, frankly. Even sports provoke arguments. However, art doesn't. It does the opposite. It opens up those questions and it keeps the dialogue going, maybe because it's so uncertain and there is no right or wrong in art. But it also makes us comfortable to question ourselves, to question everything around. And maybe that what strikes something within us that sort of answers or help you to find answers that you wouldn't otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that you could see art as a tool of self-reflection, perhaps, of putting something like a concept of on an object within your artwork? You can explore deeper the really, maybe other meanings this object could possibly have, which you don't really see in day-to-day life, or present the way you see it to the audience who have never thought of it that way, just to bring, this new picture to it, really.
No, absolutely. I think, first of all, art brings meaning to my own life. It helps me to look at the world in a very different way. So it does bring meaning to my life, but I know that art brings meaning to other people's lives as well, and we can see it very well with street artists. They're doing incredibly in that. People like J.R. Banksy, the one of the most famous probably, and sometimes you look at his work and it does sort of something just clicks inside of you, and you look at the problem in a very different way. You start thinking, oh, do I actually feel that strongly about it? Do I need to be so upset about it? Do I want to be involved in this? Which is fantastic. And artists do it in different ways. Some use live performances or humor, like the Gorilla Girls. They're fantastic as well to sort of to get their message across. Or Francis Alias is wonderful with his work. So I think most importantly, yes, or maybe first of all, it brings the meaning to the artist's life and to their way of looking into the world and into their own world. And then it helps others to question things and to bring meaning in their own lives, and maybe to become creative as well. And it doesn't have to be visual art, it doesn't have to be painting, but it can be music, it can be dance, it can be any form of art that just takes us away for a little bit and lets us be free, and then assess the situation in a different way, just because you were not manipulated. Mm-hmm. In a way that politics does, religion, technology, and other forms of modern approaches.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that art can be seen as one of the most honest, in a way, disciplines existing?
Yeah, it is very honest. It is very powerful. I always say that art is one of the best soft powers in the world. But it's free. I think it's all about the freedom of expression, and you always can judge a country by the artists that they produce. Mm-hmm. And the artists that they show within that country. You can always tell. I mean, the more they praise the authorities, the less of a democratic state that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is very interesting what you mentioned, because you can clearly see whenever you go to a gallery and many multicultural artists present their work, you can definitely see the issues they address, the views they portray. You can definitely see this tendency of the relationship between their work and where they're from. So would you say that from that, the external world, the physical external world, is very influential towards someone's kind of metaphysical ideas, which they then give back to the external world, but they through processing it internally? So what is the relationship between the external and the mental for an artist?
I think they're very interrelated. There is no way around it, and you can see it with the artists' sort of development and their growth. The older they become, the more serious issues they touch upon in their art, because of the experience that they've had or things that they have seen. So they are very interrelated. I think it's sort of, it's almost like a one natural organism that works.
Yeah. Sure. While I was exploring your website and your work, I read that you say that the process of creation is very important for you and excites you the most. So the craft itself. But what I found very interesting is that at the same time, while you're enjoying the process of creation, you're also saying that you're obsessed with the outcome. Could I just ask you about that? So where does this obsession about the outcome come from, and like how does it manifest itself?
I maybe that is coming back to my past and the old school of art of my granddad, my father, that sort of commitment to the viewer. You almost don't want to trick a viewer, so it has to be complete as a composition before you show it, and that what makes it me quite obsessed about the end result of my work, because I want the viewer to know that it is work. It's not just about me, it's also about you looking at it and visually appreciating what I have created for you to look at.
I see. It was always interesting for me. For example, I'm a person who really wants to know what the artist meant. So when I look at a painting or an installation, if I read a book or a poem, I do put my meaning into it. I do see like, oh, this is what I think they try to portray. This is the kind of the message. But I always then go and Google like, what did they mean by this? Because I really want to know what was the initial idea behind it. Do you, as an artist, is it important for you to really kind of send a particular message and people to understand it fully? Or are you happy for the viewer, for your audience to interpret it and again put their own meaning in your work?
Honestly, for me, it is about you putting your own meaning into what I do, and it's quite exciting to hear different views and opinions about what it represents. It's not about me being shy about my sort of thought process. Sometimes there is no thought process. It's almost like a meditative state. I think it's more of a sort of a curator's job to create a story around it, because people like the story. But I do like to not challenge, but I'm curious to see what people see in that.
Right. I see. That's very interesting, because different artists say different things, so that again underpins that each one of us put our own meaning in the work we do and in the work which we then give to the external world. And I just wanted to come back to the question of you obsessing over the final manifestation, as you call it, of your work. Do you know from the beginning how you want your art to look at the end, or does the understanding of the final product comes to you gradually while you're doing it?
Both, to be honest, because I sometimes I just visualize it so clearly, and until I get that specific image, I cannot rest. Sometimes I start creating that image that I visualize, but then I see other lines that kind of I get involved with and start playing along those lines, which creates something completely different. And yeah, both ways are equally interesting for me. And there is no rule per se that I only work by having an image and putting it on my canvas. Yeah.
I see. I guess it's all very case dependent. Was there like an example when you thought that you finished your piece of work, but then maybe something happened or you had a new experience and then you decided to come back to it years later, maybe months, years, and maybe completely change, or maybe just add like a little detail which changed the meaning of the original work?
It does happen all the time. Yeah, and the more you look at it, but sometimes you just have to stop because it can go on forever. And I do like to work. I work usually in the studio, but also at home, because I am constantly involved with a certain piece of art, and I look at it in the morning and in the evening it looks different, and I feel like I have to adjust it more and more and more, and that process doesn't stop until you have to sort of draw a line and say, no, this is finished now and I cannot touch it. And once it's bought, you know that you can no longer adjust it.
Yeah. People often say that professionals are really married to their craft. I guess this applies to you. You're leaving with your work constantly.
Yeah.
your place being involved with that 24/7. That's very interesting to see. Um, I know that your most of your art is abstract. And what I've been noticing is that a lot of people, they don't really see art as anything deeper than just pure aesthetic satisfaction. And this is the case. And I think especially this applies to abstract art, which is particularly hard for the general public to understand. In your opinion, can art be reduced to this pure sensory satisfaction? Is that meaningful? Yeah.
I wouldn't say reduced because I don't think there is anything negative about
Mhm.
just the aesthetics. I think it's wonderful for it to be just about the colors and shades and the way it looks. So it can be just about that, and it's also a process which can challenge your emotions. It doesn't have to provide you with answers or provoke you to question things, but it can make you emotional,
Mhm.
positively or negatively. It doesn't matter, but I think that's what, that is one of the purposes of art.
Yeah, I think this is great that you mentioned emotion, because I think emotion is one of the greatest influences which art really brings into the world, into people. And I guess whatever level of artistic understanding one have, there will still be some level of emotion which is triggered by art. And I think this is already a big thing. And for example, I really like to put very deep philosophical things into everything, maybe a little bit excessively, but I do really relate to virtue, and virtue in art, and Aristotle's approach to art in terms of virtue, where you can use art as a self, or as a case of self-reflection and of growing, and the you can understand other people through art, because it brings you some experiences which you have never had previously, or
Yeah,
wouldn't have without this art. And I think this is great, because obviously we cannot experience the whole world in our life, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately.
fortunately, yeah.
Yes, but I do really relate to that point. And I think emotion is a very big part of it as well, of self-growing and of understanding oneself. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's emotion is very strong, and it's very powerful, um, and it can cure you. It can do different things within you, and I agree that art is one of not many things that provoke you to be emotional and feel things that as a human being you need to feel, because I think we do cause a lot of tragedies to other species, to ourselves, to the environment, without even realizing it. And it's important to have that emotion that can trigger
Mhm.
your understanding, your pain, or your happiness for certain things.
Yeah, I think this really brings us to kind of the main question which I wanted to ask you, which I think is a great question to conclude our discussion with, is obviously for the past few years we've been living through some tough events with the global pandemic, with the world shifting from physical to virtual, and this is still ongoing. And we had some environmental anomalies, we had some global problems. We are now going through a very tough period with increasingly and awful tensions happening within the world of politics, which affects each and one of us to some extent. With all this events, how has your perspective and how has your view of art in your life, and the meaning you put into it and the meaning you want to take out of it as well, changed, if it has changed?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the world is upside down, frankly. And it, I mean, what's happened in the last few years, I think affected everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're, blessed with some financial commodities or not, health wise, and obviously the war, it affected everybody in a certain way. And to me, art has been incredibly helpful and soothing during these times. I have been using it as a way of meditation and just switching everything off, which is incredibly important for everyone to do. I think it can be, I don't know, either by a walk in a park or by painting. People need to do it in order to continue. And it has influenced me as well with this project of mine, the latest Wow London, in terms of pursuing it, not waiting for a better time to do it, but doing it now. Not knowing what the world is going to look like tomorrow as well kind of makes you very nervous, but at the same time it makes you understand that uncertainty is the certainty of today, and it's just something that we have to get used to and maybe take advantages of that somehow, whether it's by hugging your loved ones or by traveling somewhere, or pursuing something that you wanted to do for a long time, just not being stuck in that waiting room any longer. And art has been sort of a main figure in that, for me, on that road.
Yeah, well, I think this is absolutely great, and I relate to every single word which you just said. And I'm thankful to the existence of art and to artists like you who are very welcoming to other non-artists into their world and open for a discussion like the one we have today. And in our team of UCL Leaders, we have a lot of young students being motivated to talk to professionals like you again. And I am coming from a background of a scientific course and high scientific interest, but I am also very interested in art and the relationships art has with all of the other disciplines. And I'm very thankful to art for being so welcoming and being so open to all of the people and for being so uniting, especially nowadays when unity is one of the main kind of things which we all need as a humanity and as individuals, I think. So I think this was a great end to our discussion. Thank you so much, Annya, for being here today with me. I am absolutely thrilled to be talking to you today. And yeah, I guess if you have any final points to say.
No, I'd just like to thank you for having me, and thank you for having those discussions and holding them and inviting people, because again, this is the discussion we can hold in a room where we cannot talk about politics or religion or anything else, right? So yeah, thank you very much.